Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Hayley Spira-Bauer. Welcome back, everybody, to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. I'm so honored to introduce you to our next guest. We have Nicola Soares, also known as Nikki, the president of Kelley Education. Nikki, welcome.
Thank you, Hayley. It is so good to be here and just really looking forward to this conversation.
I am as well. I think you and I have a lot of our work overlapping in this space. And so I'm especially eager to talk to you about how schools are adapting to the current environment with federal funds changing and enrollment for students changing and teacher profession declines and increases in different parts and professions. So we have lots to talk about. Let's jump right in.
Sure.
Nikki, how did you come to be the personal and professional version of yourself?
Wow, that's a big, long story. So,
Let's hear it.
Yeah, so originally I actually came to the US in those days of what they called a foreign student, but an international student. So I went to school in New England and then went to college in Virginia. And because the district at the time of where I went to college, really wanted to have teachers that had an international background. I received my first teaching position. And from that point in time, as life kind of sort of dictates, I ended up staying here. So I've been in the US for an incredibly long time. So I did start my career as a public school social studies teacher. Wouldn't that be fun to teach today? So teaching both middle school and high school. And really for me, it was foundational for, a fairly long career in education. So I've had positions not only, obviously in instruction in the classroom, but also with an academic publisher, and then also media, actually in New York, where you are, Hayley, started their business in education, and then was recruited to lead a practice at Kelley Services that I had never heard about. I thought I knew all the entire ecosystem of goods and services, but the idea was, that there was this huge need in the country, and that there was a solution from a temporary staffing perspective that we could solve. So really the business was, to place substitute teachers on a temporary basis in public schools. So I have actually been leading our organization, and myself and team have built, a portfolio of services, over a span of over a decade, now with, literally hundreds of public school districts, charter schools, private, parochial, independent, you name it, across 40 states. So much of the core of our business is placing substitute teachers or direct hire placement of full-time teachers, or anything that you can think of being outsourced today, from food and nutrition to IT services, but also really meeting the needs in terms of special needs for students, whether it's paraeducators, special education teachers. Also recently, in the last couple of years, being able to supply pediatric therapeutic services in the form of therapists, mental health and wellness services. And then also really, more importantly, within our portfolio, we have executive search placement services for higher ed public institutions. So think of presidents, chancellors, provosts, academic deans. But saying all of that in terms of a day-to-day business and leading that on the forefront, I do consider our services to be essential. And Hayley, I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. And, having a front row seat in over 10 years, I still identify first and foremost as being an educator, being a parent, being a person in an essential service that's leading these professional services in order to meet the need. And certainly, everything that we see that with teacher shortages driving what I characterize as a national crisis, it couldn't be more important today that the noble purpose that we serve and aspire to be is hopefully meeting the need, whether it's continuity of instruction, making sure that we have service providers that are there for all of our children, for all of their needs, But to be a part of that talent supply chain that is, a part of, doing great things, right? So, and even though, things seem to be incredibly challenging in a variety of different facets, there's also a tremendous amount of good work, good people, and that there is a very shared focus of the responsibilities that we have.
Nicola, whenever I listen to folks share their answer to that first question, my neurons fire at different points. Like my brain is doing all this lighting up to hear what you said.
Yeah.
The folks listening here can't see my language, but I was rapt with attention as
Yeah.
you spoke. Obviously, this is a problem I know really well, and I appreciate how you shared the scope of what Kelly is covering to support schools and their needs. You have the background of being a teacher. You know firsthand what it means for a school not to have the staff
Yeah.
that they are required to have and also need to provide high quality services for kids. So I appreciate the breadth of your own career and how it led you to this work here today. So thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering what you think, amongst all the things you do at Kelly, are the biggest challenges facing education staffing today, and how is Kelly solving those?
Wow. And that is such an important question, and there's so much to unpack with that question, right? As everybody's sort of facing it. So the biggest challenge in terms of when we think about staffing and the existing instructional model, if you will, and I truly believe if somebody's sitting in a support position versus instructional, we're all doing the same thing. It takes a village. The biggest challenge right now is the shortages. I also think that there is something else too in terms of, the engagement, the love for the profession has just been, you know, challenged and, impacted for a variety of reasons. Very often I get asked the question, well, is it because of people who are burned out during the pandemic and things? Absolutely not. It started well before that. And so when I think about what we consider the value of a teacher in the classroom has diminished. So, when we think about, salaries not commensurate to other industry peers, especially with incoming teachers who are starting their careers, it's not even a living wage. You can't even, with college loans. I heard statistics a couple of years ago where one of, seven teachers owes 56,000 in college loans. One of seven or something, owes over 100,000. And so when you think about, the idea of starting a family, owning, the American dream of a house, paying back, it's almost impossible. And so, we've seen that sort of deterioration of, incoming freshmen pursuing an education degree. It's pretty nominal right now. Where do you go to sort of a workplace where there could potentially be a threat of an active shooter, and you have to prepare for that? All of the needs that our students have, and certainly the pandemic exacerbated some of that. So all of the mental health and wellness, all of the requirements that are placed on teachers today and also support staff personnel is ginormous. So to me, schools are the cornerstone of our communities. And I would say the biggest thing right now is just the challenge I actually think is actually, and it's also an opportunity to reimagine what the teaching profession could be or what a school model could look like. And there's so many great things, but it's going to take all stakeholders at all levels, whether it be at a legislative level, whether it's community leaders, school leaders themselves, even individuals to really think about priorities. How do we do this differently? And certainly, this, Hayley, that, with funding being such a huge question right now, our schools and our leaders have to make so many hard decisions in terms of balancing everything that they have to do in a fiscally responsible way. But at the same time, they're expected to make sure that engagement is there for all stakeholders and that it's a positive place to work and to learn.
Whew, such a hefty topic. And I agree with you. There is no more important topic today in our education system. But I want to touch on for a second. You made the comment that it's going to take a reimagining of our systems. Can you paint us a picture, Nikki? Can you tell us if you, in your role, had the power to wave a magic wand and create a system that is redesigned for the current needs and the current climate? What would it look like?
Yeah. Okay, so if I had my Christmas wish list and I had the magic wand, whatever you want to call it, I would start from scratch again. I believe that our schools need to be the cornerstone of our communities. It's where people come and they celebrate together, they break bread, they learn. And I think that the responsibility of educating it doesn't just stop at the doorstep of our students. It could be to a broader community. But it seems like there's lots of debate and thought of what should be taught in schools and everything else. And for the most part, we put focuses of where we think, where jobs or this or whatever is going or what's going to be for the future. So coming from working for a workforce solutions organization like Kelly Services that deploys all sorts of human capital solutions worldwide, globally, what have you, massive disconnect in terms of education and academia, in terms of how we prepare our students, if you will, in terms of lifelong employment or skills or things like that. Complete disconnect. So I've done a lot of work just understanding what are the future skills, what's needed, and really providing that data. That's something, and that would be, sort of impactful when we think about curriculum and infusing, real life applications and all sorts. And we certainly need to really rethink that and lots of work around that. Second is really about how we fund a workforce, how we incent a workforce. And certainly much has been talked about teacher salaries not being commensurate with a, junior level engineer or a nurse or, so we need to get that right. How we subsidize schools, obviously there's a lot of conversation on how and what we do, and hopefully there's not a lot of quid pro quo in terms of actions and things. But I just think that if we could start and really think about how we fund, but I also think we need to really look at how we prepare our teachers and how we certify them. So, there's been very traditional pathways, obviously, through, teacher preparation programs through schools of education and your traditional universities and colleges. But I can tell you, and I know you know this very well, that there are all sorts of other alternative programs, whether it's alt-cert, organizations, whether they're homegrown programs, whether whatever, because the need now necessitates to do something different. I am now seeing, especially our public school districts, really inviting that in because we have such a shortage. I will give you kind of some examples of things that I think are absolutely fascinating. So when I think about the tens of thousands of people that we employ on an annual basis, we've got lots of folks that are coming in from very unexpected areas of professional careers that might have gotten burnt out. So like healthcare professionals, RNs, PAs, LPNs, were very burnt out from a hospital system and pandemic, but are truly still purpose-driven professionals and are looking to still provide care and help people. What better way than being a substitute teacher or coming into a school of some sort? Because those credentials and skills can transfer into science and special ed classrooms, as an example. So I just think that we need to be more creative, more open to alternative ideas. And as we think about the coupling of how we do indeed fund, so that our school communities, if you will, are sustainable for the long term, that's the work that needs to be done. But it's got to be done at all levels and at all stakeholder positions.
That is a picture that I can get behind. The only piece that I know that I would add to that I feel like is really critical as well is to know that in education, the way we run schools is the
Yeah.
same as it has been for centuries.
Yes.
And we have an opportunity to redesign what the physical school day looks like for
Yeah.
kids and for teachers. And there's so much to be said about how to make the profession more sustainable. You've named some very critical parts of that. I also think that, I actually went to dinner with a friend of mine who's a teacher last night, and she said to me, she's like, I love teaching. Teaching, being in front of the classroom, being with my kids, that's not the problem. I'm burnt out from everything else around the actual
Right.
teaching. And how can we clear teachers' abilities to focus on what they love doing? Because we're not entering this profession for the money. That's
No.
for sure.
There's something to be said too, and the thing that I go back to when I started my career as a teacher retention for first year teachers, second, third, or whatever is critical. But how we teach and how we support our teachers too is something to be said. So I started my career on a team, so in high school. So you had me, social studies, biology, English, and we shared the same kids. And what was so novel about that is that we went through the next couple of years with the same kids. So it reduced disciplinary referrals, helped with graduation rates and learning, right? So it was building those microcosms of little communities there. So those are kinds of some of the things we should be exploring as well. Because, what your friend says, I completely agree. Sage on the stage, and being with your kids and watching, the aha moments, fantastic. But our teachers, they need to be supported with all the other things that they're expected to do.
You brought up a really key point about retention, and I'm curious what strategies Kelly is using to attract and retain high quality educators in their pool.
Yeah. So in the last couple of years, engagement of actually having folks in our employment, it's been a little bit easier. And I'm sure people are like shocked that, wow, is that really, we hear the opposite about substitute teachers, but we do an amazing amount of professional development and continued education too before we even place, an individual into the classroom. We want to make sure they're as well prepared as they possibly can, especially with some folks that may not have an education background. But the other piece of our value prop is really thinking about our clients in terms of a true partnership. They are an extension of the workforce within those schools. So, the request, add them to your faculty meetings, let them participate in professional development, celebrate substitute teachers. We do a lot of recognition on a monthly basis. Even we have our substitute teacher of the year that we're getting ready to do, of being able to really recognize those folks as being a fundamental part of that talent supply chain is essential. But I do believe what's key is the continued education.
I'm glad you touched on the point about professional development, support, the power of partnership. It could feel so lonely when you close a door or a metaphorical door if it's happening online as a teacher and not have collaboration and partnership the way many other professions do. So it's so important when we talk about collegiality, partnership, and collaboration to name that as a key element to retain incredible talent in the workforce. And it's amazing to hear how you feel like that's been a strength of Kelly's over the past couple of years, despite what the trends have been nationally for teachers in schools. How do you see the role of technology shaping the future of education staffing?
Yeah, so that's great. I often I hear more on the side of disruption. I personally think like with AI enabled tools, like, in the idea of match or whatever you would like to do, I find it complementary to human capital. I'm extremely excited to see what can happen there. I would say, given the needs of our clients, especially across the board, and what we anticipate in the next couple of years, the role of a staffing provider or even workforce solutions providers, especially with public school districts doing exactly what we're talking about, reimagining and doing all sorts, is still very critical. As a consultative advisor, a trusted advisor, is really important. I do think, though, that staffing providers need to employ as much tech as possible to make the work easier to source, to connect, whatever tools that we can have that, like I said, complements the human capital. And certainly in our world, we use a lot of technology. Ours, especially with real-time absences and filling. I mean, I like to think that some of the technology platforms that we use are sort of the Uber for education. So matching the ride with the driver is matching the talent to the assignment.
Yeah, I think we have a lot more of exciting tech developments happening that can continue
Yeah,
to aid ensuring that the best teachers and best educators are in front of students. So I appreciate the notion that technology plays a
yeah,
pivotal role
absolutely.
here. Speaking of the best teachers being in front of the best students, something that I hold near and dear as an
Mm.
educator and in my work today at Fullmind is the power of the work we do and measuring the impact. How do you all partner with schools to improve outcomes, and how do you measure or indicate the success of these initiatives?
Yeah. So, a couple things, when you do deploy folks, depending on, where or how big or what the need is, we do a lot of mentoring and coaching. And actually, we do classroom observations of especially our long-term assigned teachers. One of the things that how we partner too is to make sure that we also have sort of a mentoring match too, with our clients, with their full-time, staff or faculty, with our folks as well. You know, obviously, students don't rate the assignments of substitute teachers or things like that, given, but our schools do rate, and they do provide feedback on our substitute teachers too. We're obviously also measuring, successful assignments that are completed on an annual basis with individuals. For us, we've got all sorts of folks that work many days of 180-day school year. And so there are benchmarks that we do set for folks. We do reward efforts with service bonuses and things like that in terms of recognition, which we think is really, really important with the performance. And then on the client side, obviously we're measuring with classrooms filled. We call it fill rate in terms of assignments that, hopefully that are being met. As an example, in the state of Florida, we have very high fill rates. On average on any given day, it's anywhere between, 96% to 100% fill rate, in the coverage. But that takes a team and a village, to obviously utilizing the technology and the coverage in order to be able to do that. And Hayley, I mean, sourcing and recruitment and making sure that a talent pool that's viable and that's also incredibly vetted. I mean, we talked about background screens and all the credentialing criteria that we have. We want to make sure the best qualified people are being deployed into our classrooms. So there's a ton of measurement around all of that. And obviously too, before we even start a program, we're evaluating usages and, where are the gaps? How do we help to make sure that they have equal coverage, looking at all of their academic and disciplines, to make sure that things are covered. Part of the service for us too is that many of our clients, they have the opportunity to source and experience a variety of different talent. And, part of that value prop is that they get to hire out of that pool so that it's a sourcing feed for full-time teachers.
Yeah, that's an interesting component of this that I wasn't anticipating getting into, but I'm glad that you brought it up. Ultimately, as a business, it behooves you to have great talent in your pool, but I hear what you're saying here. How do you balance that particular need for the school to have a full-time educator with keeping your talent pool rich and
Yeah,
talent?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it comes down to sort of world-class recruitment, right? So, I would say in a big part of our employment with our full-time recruiting professionals, we have a lot of, teachers that are recruiting teachers, right? So they understand it. But it is, a constant, focus on that sourcing and recruiting. So even if you are, fulfilling the need for long-term assignments because there might be vacancies that, districts cannot, find the right talent, but they're looking and they want to experiment or, try the talent before hire because retention is such a huge issue. But we also have the need for the day-to-day substitute teacher needs like a last-minute absence or covering a professional development day. So there's very focused segmentation on the recruiting needs as our teams are organized and deployed on.
As you look to the future of Kelly's work in this space, what has you most excited?
So, as there's lots going on right now, swirl or whatever, but as I sort of think about, in the moment of being forcing ourselves to be very calm and very focused, I always believe through challenges come silver linings. So, recently with some of the conversations that I've had, um, just with superintendents, just knowing that they need to make the district themselves as the best educational offering that any family, parent, student would want to be a part of, and to really strive towards the level of excellence that I do think that there seems to be a new found reimagined focus on education. So meaning that what we need to be offering is the most equitable, the most competitive in terms of offerings, and that there are curriculum and activity that, regardless of pathways of what students will choose, whether it's professional skills, whether it's trades, or if it's college bound or whatever, that we are preparing the very best. Just recently having a conversation with a CHRO of a district who wants to recruit outside of the state to get the very best teachers in place and wants to do some really creative programming around that. That's what gets me really excited when I see sort of this kind of resurgence, if you will, of excitement of doing some things differently. And so I think, I've realized, especially when, the pandemic hit, a business like ours was certainly impacted, and we were right there alongside with our clients and, more importantly, our talent. We had to really reimagine services and really think about, we had this opportunity to do things a little bit differently. That's what makes me excited. So, in terms of just recognizing that in the opportunity as an opportunity within the moment.
I love a good outside the box thinker. I think
Always.
the place we're in our society, we have to think outside the box. We can't repeat the same mistakes we've seen before. And there's no more important profession than education. They are the people that shape the lives of the next generation. And so I am lockstep with you here, Nikki.
Yeah.
I really am. Nikki, my final question for you is, what advice would you give a teacher starting their career today?
I remembered back from my own teacher prep days, I heard a peer of mine who was a student that said, "Oh, I'm just getting my teaching certificate because it's something to fall back on." And I can remember speaking up and saying, "You need to be pursuing teacher because you love it. Like it's your purpose, it's your mission in life." So my advice is, this is an amazing career. And it's also very foundational that you can do all sorts of other things as well. But no bigger gift than we can give to our country right now is having great teachers that are purpose-driven, who love students, who want the very best. To me, probably one of the best patriotic callings that we can have in this day and age. So it's an amazing career. But be purpose-driven.
Nikki, thank you so much for coming here and sharing your wisdom and your expertise. It has been an absolute pleasure interviewing you.
Mine too. Thank you, Hayley. I've enjoyed the conversation.
And thank you to everybody for tuning in today. Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.